Welcome to Descendants of the Imagination. I'm Jasiri Jenkins Glenn. Today, our guest host, editor and poet John Laue will have a conversation with novelist and educator Stan Rushworth.
There are millions of us out here like me who know who we are and who know what we are, but our tribal affiliations are very broad. So we're what people in the 60s and 70s call part of a pan-Indian movement.
Stan Rushworth, of Cherokee descent, teaches English and Native American studies at Cabrillo College. Although he writes original fictional stories, he integrates motifs and themes of traditional storytelling found in Native American cultures, in particular, those of the Cherokee Nation.
I feel myself as Cherokee or Tsalagi, as a member of the Tsalagi diaspora. So there are stories, so I'm not an expert in Cherokee or Tsalagi traditional stories, but I wouldn't presume to tell those stories because that belongs to the traditional storytellers. I'm a novelist, a teacher. My native influences have been Tsalagi through my grandfather, through growing up with him.
I'd like to start by asking him about a story that he told me, which involves his grandfather and dragonflies.
It was shortly after my mother had given me to him to raise Old Way. This is what she said: "Our way is dying, you raise him, Old Way." So he took me along the ditch bank. We were on the Stanislaus River, and we got to a point where there was a pond at the ditch bank, and he kind of looked at me and said, with his eyes, "Sit down." So I sat down, and we came to the pond. At that time, life in the San Joaquin Valley, this is 1949, was very fecund. And so there were frogs, and there were birds, there were all kinds of things in the tules. And as we sat down, everything went silent. And my grandpa just looked at me with his eyes and just said, "Sit and wait." So we sat and waited. And shortly the frogs came up, the birds came back, everything became alive again. Frog sounds, everything was really extraordinary. And then at a certain point, hundreds upon hundreds of dragonflies came over the pond. Several different kinds, the little damselflies with the bright blue, fluorescent blue, kind of like this shirt, and big fat red ones and so on. And I'm getting, wide-eyed like a little kid. And I realized all of a sudden that they're all copulating, right? That this is, they're all mating, and some are flying backwards, and they're all joined together. And they came up, a bunch of them came up and just looked right into my eyes, right here. And it's like I was filled with life, on a really elemental level. I was excited in my whole body. And I looked over at my grandpa, and he looked at me, and his eyes were smiling, and he just went. So since our ceremonies and such were outlawed, I consider that story the first ceremony I was ever in. No drums, no feathers, just dragonflies.
And you got it.
I got it. Never left me.
Are there other stories in the Cherokee tradition that are similar?
There are all kinds of stories in Cherokee traditions that deal with all the animals, because the whole purpose of most of the stories is to let us know, let us feel on a really intimate level that all the animals around us are not simply something distant to appreciate, like the environment, to appreciate the environment, or the earth as our mother. It's not a metaphor, it's a very literal thing. So all these stories that would have dragonfly and rabbit and wolf and all these really let the children know, they let people who seek the stories know that we're all family.
I should introduce your two books. One is Sam Wood's American Healing, which really helped me. It talks about balance. I need balance.
I'm glad, thank you.
And the other one, Going to Water, which I think is a masterwork and will survive many, many generations. It's so rich in imagery, it's like poetry. I'd like to introduce chapter 16 of Stan's book, Going to Water. And it basically has two different strands of thought in it. One is about a witch boy who is a hunter and has, I think, a bad attitude about hunting.
This story actually comes out of an experience that I had with my grandfather. And when I was about 7, I got my first rifle, and he took me out hunting. We shot an animal. And he had me take a beat on it very carefully, look at the animal. I squeezed off the round, the animal fell dead. We walked up to it, he picked it up, and he put it in my hands. And he said, and it was still warm, and he said, feel the life of this animal. Feel its life force. And now feel its life force leave. And realize that every time you pick up a weapon, that's a choice you're making, and this is going to be the result. And the witch boy made a choice simply to enjoy the power. And he kept that secret from his grandfather, and he kept it secret from the people as the story develops. Now, this ties in to Salage, what Salage witches are all about. Ravenmocker is a key one, because the principal idea of a witch is around deception. Okay? And the purpose of the witch is cannibalistic, if you will.
Like a vampire in a way.
Yes, it's to take the life force. Ravenmocker takes the life force of people who are dying and takes it into himself. And what takes away a witch's power is simply being seen. And this is a major theme in the novel. This is why early on, Agana says, is this about forgiveness? No, it's not about forgiveness, it's about seeing, all right? Because as we see these things, as we see the Holocaust that's happened here, as we see how the degradation or the desecration of the people here ties in to the desecration of the land, that ties into the desecration of the life force itself. So we buy into the idea that material property, power over others, ownership, like slavery, all these things are fundamental lies. They're fundamental deceptions about what the purpose of humanity is all about.
That relates to the other theme of the chapter, 16, which is about the corn and how priests take the magic of the corn and claim it for their own, and then a whole hierarchy grows up, which is a metaphor for me of what's happened in many of the Western religions.
In Salagi history, if you will, nobody knows exactly when it happened, there was a priest class that took over the life of the people, and they demanded so much fealty that the people were working, hunting, growing food, doing everything they were doing for the benefit of the priesthood. Yeah. They finally overthrew the priests, killed them, and went back to their more egalitarian style of living. This idea of the corn as a priesthood was not part of Salage culture. In the Salage traditions, the corn mother, Silu, is all about sacrificing herself to feed the people. I'm working with the Mesoamerican cultures that went to empire, because empire is kind of an impulse, and when you follow that impulse to empire, you mess everything up.
Considered dangerous religious practices by whites resettling in America, Cherokee practices such as dancing, singing, storytelling, and the sweat lodge were banned until 1978.
Stan, I wonder about the sweat lodges. I've known people, and you and other people, who have gone into them, and it means a lot to them.
The one that I've spent most of my years in is called Ta'achi Nada, which means a place of wonders and miracles. This is a place where we remember, where we feel that sense of timelessness. They're kind of like stories in a sense because they tie us to the traditions in a really, really visceral way. The sweat lodge, for almost all peoples I know of, and certainly for us in the Tsalagi and in the Nde, is going into the womb. It's going back into the womb.
Interesting.
And in that connection with the mother, in that connection with the womb, there is the connection with all the people for thousands of years who have created this. And the songs that are sung in there, some of them are thousands of years old.
I didn't even know they sung songs.
Oh yeah, it's a whole structure that's happening. And so when you sing these songs, you know, you're tied to the ancestors in a really profound and beautiful way.
The sweat lodge, a long tradition among most Native American nations, served not only for spiritual purposes for adults, but also as an initiation rite for young boys as they transitioned into adulthood. While Stan was unable to legally experience the sweat lodge until 1979, his son underwent his initiation into manhood at age 13 in 2014.
Because it was with the women in the sweat lodge, I kind of felt like they were saying goodbye to me in the sense of just congratulating me on my way of going from being a child or a little boy who's only dependent on the mothers to being in between being a child and adult. And I knew I was gonna develop myself more.
And now there was the time to pass him on. That's basically what it is. It's just marking a moment in time. It's not something that you switch on the light and now everything is different.
It was a great time for me to be able to reflect on myself and have the spirits tell me that I was on my way. And I saw the different spirits of my ancestors that died, and my grandpa, my grandma, from actually both sides of my family, not just my Native American side, but my German side as well.
In the sweat lodge, it was just cradling him once more. It was watching him how he would take it, because it's a physically very intense experience. It gets very, very hot. And eventually there comes a point in time where your body can take it and where it transforms you inside and out. And how it transforms you, it will unfold.
Because it was so dark in the sweat lodge, all you could really see was just the darkness. One thing that I saw visibly in my head was these different colors, or lights, if you will, that were, I think, representing the spirit of the ancestors who were congratulating me on my way, just like the women were.
The women that he went in with in the first 2 rounds of the lodge were women that have been around him all his life. His mom, Marita, who was there when he was born, Naomi Cruz, who he's known since they're both children, and then the men. It was the same thing. These are people that have been going into the lodge that he'd been seeing standing at the prayer fire for years since he was very small.
After the women left and the men came in, I just knew that I was going into my own gender of people, and I was now going from being taken care of from the women to being taken care of the men.
I wish I'd been able to go through that. So the fact that I hadn't made it much more difficult for me over the course of my lifetime to integrate my grandfather's teachings.
You gave me the tape of 3 elders from Indian nations speaking.
Yeah.
And one point that they made, what I thought was really interesting, is that it's appropriate to have different creation stories from different nations.
People want Native American spirituality to all be the same.
It's so different from some of the religions, for instance, saying ours is the only one.
I as much honor all the people from different traditions that have influenced me in my life.
Chapter 37 of Stan's wonderful book, Going to Water, talks about Little Rain, who is making a sand painting. She makes it and then she disperses it, which reminds me of the Buddhist sand paintings, which are quite famous, which show the transience of everything. That's, I believe, the philosophy behind them.
She touched me on the shoulder first, then her sandy fingers stroked my cheek, and she guided me to the painting. Behind my closed eyes, listening to the day I'd known, she began finishing the painting. Focusing on the circular palette at the bottom center, she moved quickly but carefully, and the face took shape. As it did, the painting seemed to move. The sun shifted and light played at the circle of sand, and it seemed to lift up, or the faces moved of themselves, took on expressions as if to speak to us, and the rice plants seemed to shift in the breeze coming down from above us, the air reaching down to ripple the pond surface and curl around our shoulders. She paid no attention to the breeze and the changes in the painting and the weather, but worked on, taken in completely by her task, and her body gained strength as she moved. The eyes of the central final face were the last shapes to form. Allies work over time. I saw it explode right in front of me then, and Little Rain pushed my shoulder with the back of her hand. She put her small hand on my chest as I turned toward her from the shove, then put it on my own chest quickly, back and forth, leaving tan and prints on both of us. The painting glowed, Little Rain glowed, and the breeze rose to a light swirling wind, the faces staring up at both, static and vibrant at this time. The wind increased, whipping the pond surface, and the birds darted into the deep brush far away from thrashing branches, quick flashes of color. A summer squall flew over us, and the painting held strong in a flurry of raindrops flying horizontal in all directions. I looked into the bright sky as a quick, lone, dark cloud came over us and kept on running to wherever it was going in such a hurry. And then I looked back down at Rain, and she had the slightest turn of a smile on her upturned face. It was the first time, her first smile. Then we turned our faces down to the painting once again simultaneously. She bent forward without hesitation and scooped her hand into the lake, into the faces, the canoes, the airplane, and steadily cast their heat and life high into the wind, one by one, trailing wisps and tendrils of sand into the wind until there was nothing left on the ground but mounds and cavities, the pond's edge, as though a small child had danced there and left her footprints of joy and abandon. But she was earnest, not gleeful like a child. She was purposeful and resolved in the way she dispersed the sand, as though knowing it had to go back to its source in order to live again another time in another way, as though she knew absolutely everything about what she was doing.
Chapter 37 is really, really important chapter because it ties into the whole purpose of what I want to say about really what this project that you folks are doing about Descendants of the Imagination, and where art and the imagination and the story all come alive. Because this is where the sand painter, who, by the way, this is not a Saligate tradition, which is another idea I'm working with. That this is a young woman whose family came from the Southwest. So she's doing this, you know, right outside this little Saligate town.
You're eclectic, in other words, with your selection of stuff.
I'm trying to say that our powers of story, that our powers of artwork, so many, that they all fuse together. You know, Buffy St. Marie is doing beautiful artwork now with computer graphics.
Yeah.
You know, she's putting together all kinds of fantastic stuff, and some people say, well, you know, you're going outside your tradition, and she's going, artistic expression is our tradition.
Sure.
That's our tradition. We need not be stuck to the rituals. The ritual is really important within a certain context. The vitality of the art is a changing, dynamic thing, is what's absolutely crucial to what Gerald Visner calls our survivance, where we are not locked in victimry, where we are defining our lives through all the tools that are given to us now. Russell Means' son does rap on the reservations, trying to get kids out of suicidal tendencies and stuff. He does rap music. Rap music comes from the indigenous people of Africa, the griot.
Yeah.
So, you know, you see Superman, who's a native rapster that Rico is really into, is dressed in full regalia, dancing and doing native rap. So my novel is, in a sense, an expression of that. In the chapter, Little Rain is seeing all the allies that are forming her power to live. She's seeing Johnny, she's seeing the Anishinaabe woman, she's seeing Grandfather Tree, she's seeing all of these people who are countering the fears that have been implanted inside of her imagination, which ties directly into her life force through Dachau, the images of Dachau, the images of Nagasaki, you know, the horrible things in life that have suppressed her id, if you will, or her desire to life, her belief in life. So as she's painting and she sees all these things in the sand, she takes part in her life in a new way, because she's got all these people supporting her and what they represent supporting her across time.
We just had an airplane, and there's an airplane in her sand painting. What does the airplane mean?
The airplane in the sand painting is Will Rogers, who loved to fly.
Ah.
And Will Rogers was a great hero in my family. And he was Saligate right to the core, okay? All these people come together across time is saying that recognizing allies across time is how we come out of the big lie, which is that we're isolate beings. And then you become subject to what's called, a lot of people call individualism, all right? Which is a different thing than autonomy. Autonomy, it's really important to remember that within all native societies, which are based on community, autonomy, personal autonomy is absolutely necessary in order to live in community with power.
You have your protagonist, who's a Native American woman, visiting Hitler, Pol Pot, and various people. Generally, time travel is in science fiction and so forth, but your time travel is different.
I think Darrell Wilson's comment on the back of the book says it best, where he says, this is not science fiction. This is the way time really works. But most people have forgotten that. You know, you don't start, okay, let's see, when I was in first grade, And then you get up to Moss Landing and you're in 2nd grade, and then you get a little further up and you're in 3rd grade. It's not a sequential process. It's a process that's generated by emotional triggers. Now, we think of the imagination as something where you make things up. I don't feel it's that way. To me, the imagination is a nation of images, and it's where all the images of human experience are deposited. Okay? And as writers, as artists, we have
Like
that.
archetypes, Jung's archetypes.
In a sense,
fit
yeah.
there. In a sense, yeah.
But literal images, experiences. You go onto a piece of land, you go onto a Civil War battle site, and you feel that. You know, you really feel that. And what kind of images might get triggered. In some ways, it's mysterious, but in some ways, it's not. And for most of the Native people that I know, particularly elders, they say this is all in our blood memory, all of this. And so we begin to be liberated by the pain of it, by seeing it, not by denying it. And that's kind of the essence of what I'm trying to achieve with this book.
You've been watching Descendants of the Imagination. I hope you've enjoyed our show today on Native American storytelling with our guest, Stan Rushworth. I'm Jasiri Jenkins Glenn. Please join us again for next time on our journey through the imagination.
Thank you for the Virgin. Thank you for the radio. Thank you for the iron sheets, the bullets and the blades. And thank you for the whiskey and the dirty nylon dresses and the blankets and diseases. Thank you, say the shades. Thank you for these engines. Thank you for the oil. They say now you own the future. Now you own the soil. And we say thank you to the elders. Thank you to the singers, the keepers of the dreams and the keepers of the names. Thank you for the Falcons news. Thank you for the dream time. Thank you for the life that springs like magic from the flame. And thank you to the dancers, to those who raise the phoenix, to those who listen hard to learn and try to do the same.